Welcome, everyone. I'm David, but I will explain who I am a bit later during that talk. So basically, we'll talk about event. We'll talk about evented API gateway. Maybe I've got the most complex title during the talk. I don't know. So I hope that you will get me during the talk and what I will try to explain to you. So basically, we are most of the time telling that the first minute are quite critical during a talk. That's even more true when it's just 20 minutes talk. So let's go directly to the goal and to the objective. So I'm sure you guys, you already attend maybe some of the talks talking about event-driven architecture, maybe evented API, I don't know. We are not there to tell you that you have to go that way or you have to go to the other way. We'll try to find the best way, to find the right mix between your legacy APIs and the evented APIs. So that will be a kind of hybrid approach, and we'll see all with Gravity, obviously. We are trying to answer that sort of questions for evented API and evented gateway. But, because there is always a but, we'll have to do that with your event APIs still in the same way as you may secure, as you may govern, and as you may try to get the more reliable services for your event APIs. So basically, what's the promise in that world? One of the first use cases is about data ingestion. So this one is quite simple, I would say. So basically, you've got some, let's say, consumers or producer, it depends on the way, but basically you've got people who are consuming your APIs and trying to push some data, some messages to your underlying system, whatever what the system is. In that case, that's a Kafka broker, that's a Kafka topic. So we are looking at posting data through something, what we are calling API in that case, to a Kafka broker. That's one of the first use cases. And you're still looking at applying some, let's say, basic capabilities from an API management perspective to that sort of stream. The second use case is about the event consumption. So that's not just for you as a producer to post data to your broker, that's the opposite. So basically to tell your consumers how they can get data. So in that case, we are telling them, okay, let's just do a kind of HTTP GET to your APIM solution and let the APIM solutions to do a kind of protocol mediation between what the consumers are used to do, basically everything on top of the HTTP protocol. So REST API, basically legacy API, I would say, and let the gateway to do the protocol mediation in regards to the messaging system in that case, so again, Kafka. Okay, so that's cool, but now we are looking at achieving this. Maybe what I will do first is just to explain who am I. So I'm David, I'm the chief architect at Gravity. I'm also one of the 4 co-founders at Gravity, so a French company. I'm sure you may expect from my fabulous Franglish, I would say. What I like is just beer, like maybe a lot of people here. I like to do and make pizzas and like to play drums, just to forget about everything. So yeah, that's basically about me, David. But I'm not sure that's the most interesting part for the talk. I'm used to do meetings, so I'm saying call. So let's back to the initial program. So it was a time when things were very simple. So you've got consumers doing HTTP calls to something, and we were trying to proxify in some ways all the calls to underlying backends such as REST backends, maybe SOAP backends, because you're still continuing at maintaining some, I don't know, we were just talking about ESB from the previous talk, so kind of things we can do on top of the HTTP protocol. But then, when you're talking about event, that's not just the previous technologies, that's some new one potentially, and most of the time that's messaging technologies. So now you'll have to find the best way to try to mix what the consumers are used to do and what you can find as per the different technologies from a backend perspective, such as we talked about already, what's the name, Kafka. We can see here MQTT, the Solace guys, RabbitMQ, maybe Amazon Kinesis. So that sort of different technologies. For sure, that's coming with some maybe issues. And the most fundamental one is the communication issues, because as you may probably know, because I'm sure you're all big fans of APIs, we are used at doing a request and just waiting for response with what you were expecting in terms of data. We are all used to do that sort of things. That's good, that's totally stateless, that's a kind of point-to-point communications, and we are trying to apply some security, governance, maybe applying some policies for applying some transformation to that sort of stream. And what is good is that we can rely on some tools, some specifications, such as the Open API specifications for defining and basically defining the contract approach for designing that kind of request response paradigm, I would say. But then for event-driven APIs, you will face some issues because basically the different technologies are not really supporting, I would say, the legacy request response paradigm. And so we have to introduce some other ways to consume the different data from your heterogeneous technologies. So this model, so top right, is or must be fully asynchronous. It will be stateful in some ways because we'll have to maintain a kind of long connections between the consumers and the different technologies, backend technologies. It will introduce also a new model because it will not be just about doing a request and waiting for a response. It will be a kind of publish, subscribe paradigm. So I'm publishing something somewhere, I'm subscribing to something for getting some data from my API. A good point, that's the same as for the legacy APIs where we had the Open API specification. A good point is that we have something which can contract what you can do with async API, event-driven APIs, which is called async API. And one of the difference is more about the protocol at the end, because for legacy APIs, we are heavily relying on basically a lot of things on top of the HTTP protocol. So HTTP, SOAP, maybe GraphQL, whereas with event-driven APIs, you will have to deal with some other protocols, such as maybe WebSockets, maybe server-sent event, maybe the protocols coming from the underlying technologies like Kafka, MQP, MQTT, etc., etc. Just checking the time. Cool. Okay, that was the issue, mainly a technical issues, but that's not where you have to stop because you're still facing or you're still some challenge from a functional and business perspective. And we know that with the introduction of event-driven architecture, event-driven APIs, there are so many benefits that you can't just escape and just say, okay, we have some issues from a tech perspective, so we should try to avoid that kind of model. So I will not go through the different points, not sure it makes sense, and I've seen some people taking some pictures of the slide. I will spend too much time on it, but you're most welcome to come to the booth so we can go through that one. For going to the, event-driven APIs, there is 3 ways to go for it. First is to try to all in and say, okay, I just forget about everything and I will start from scratch on async API and I will introduce something completely new without having to manage the change in regards to the producer, in regards to the consumers. I think that's rarely the case and we all agree on that one. The second case would be for us to try to replace step by step what's already existing. So all the synchronous APIs, and we'll try to replace them, depending on the different use cases, with asynchronous APIs. And the last point will be for us to find what we call the hybrid ways from the first slide, but basically to try to find a mix between your consumers, which are used to do something on top of the HTTP protocol, still by maintaining the different heterogeneous technologies as the backend. Okay, cool. But then what's next? We'll now go through the complete history of APIs. There are many ways to use APIs. We used to use APIs for different purposes. First, from a communication perspective, then we introduce APIs for maybe managing the service mesh. Then we introduce the event-driven APIs for managing real-time constraint, real-time requirements, maybe with the introduction of IoT, etc., etc. The good thing is that, as I already said, we have some specifications such as OpenAPI and Async API to help us on that way. But we need to face, no worries, 3 challenges. The first one is about the behavior and the time perspective when you're establishing this kind of relationship with your APIs. As I explained, we have a request-response paradigm versus the publish-subscribe paradigm between Sync and Async API. The second challenge will be in regards to the protocol, because when you're dealing with Sync APIs, that's always something on top of the HTTP protocol, which we know very well. But then with Async API, and if you want to introduce a real async approach, you will have to deal with other protocols. Obviously, the TCP one, because most of the drivers or clients for the different technologies will be on top of the TCP layer, so the layer 4. But then you will have to deal with the, let's say, the provider protocol, and maybe deal with their client, their drivers, to do what you're looking for. And obviously, because that's not the way you want to do things, you will have to also manage differently the way you want to secure the access to the technologies, and you'll have to maybe use other tools or maybe libraries for establishing the connections and managing the streams between you as a consumer and the different technologies. So I'm kind of dreamer, and so what I would like to see is something where we could centralize everything from the same platform, from the same solution. So what I would like as a pure API management provider is to provide this centralized access to different sources of data. So the one we saw from the previous slides. Obviously, I would still want to manage what we are used to call the catalog of APIs. So whatever it's sync or async APIs, you will still want to manage all the consumers to your API. So you will still want to apply some restrictions to the consumers, such as rate limitations. So that's not like you will apply rate limitations to just the number of requests, but maybe you will try to filter and reduce the number of messages coming through the stream. So that's another point. Obviously, we are all dreaming about security, so you will have to rely on the fundamentals to manage the same way, the way to secure your legacy APIs versus the async APIs. The documentation, we discussed about async API specification versus the open API specification. That's something you want to keep and to provide to your consumers from your API portal or to your developer portal. And then obviously all the things around monitoring, the metrics, the analytics, who's doing what, when, how it was done, etc., etc. So for sure, we've seen things change, but then we need to find a solution where we have and we want to bring all these new capabilities to your platform, whatever, again, it's about sync APIs or async APIs. So there are 3 use cases. I think I have 5 minutes left. Cool, I'm good. So 3 main use cases and the different values. The first one, I'm sure you will recognize the first one of the first slides we go through at the very beginning of the talk, but that's basically one of the things you will want to achieve. So I really want as the consumers to be able to post some messages, some events, again, whatever the kind of backend technologies, again, that's Kafka, but it could be, MQTT, Solace, whatever, you can build your own. And I still want to rely on the capabilities offered by the platform, managing the authentication, managing the permission, managing the access to the services, managing the routing, the analytics, the designs, because that's one of the fundamentals from an API management perspective, and bringing all those things to the developers coming to consume your services. Another example is from an event consumption perspective, because previously we talked about the HTTP GET, but that's not just a GET, because a GET is just a request response, that's all. Then here you need to establish a long and persistent connection to the API management solution, so that the consumers can receive in a near real-time approach all the things coming from your messaging system in that case. Another one, webhook. So instead of maintaining that long connection or persistent connection, you will tell your solution, your API management or your API gateway, okay, I'm just interested in that sort of data. So just tell me when you're receiving something and push that data to my backend server or to my callback server, so that I don't have to maintain that long connection. And that's your responsibility, you as an API gateway, to tell me when you're receiving something from my broker. So the conclusion, which is more or less the same as my first slide, maybe I would just spoke about the latest point. So we saw the different ways to manage, let's say, event-driven APIs. That's not like you have to go again for an all-in to event-driven API. So you'll have to find the best of breed, basically, and find the right technologies and the right best practices to answer to that kind of problem. I'm sure you will face maybe today, maybe in the future. So yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome.
Thank you, David. Any questions? Excellent talk. I have one, maybe, but does anybody else have the same dreams as he has? Because I'm having those kind of unmanaged Kafka endpoint nightmares with my clients. Anybody else? So, yeah, I think we all are in the same soup. Any questions? Yes. Xavier, somebody's asking any question?
Yes. I'm just looking at the webhook model. From an event-driven architecture, I was looking at the webhook model. Yeah. And I wanted to know, is Gravity, for example, here helping in standardizing the callback URL type? Because you will need to adapt to each of them then.
So you can, no issue. So basically, that's not like everyone wants the same thing. So with Gravity especially, what you can do is to let the guys to subscribe to an API. Right, subscribing to the APIs, they have to bring obviously the callback URL with maybe some additional information, such as all the security aspects, token, etc. But then, as part of Gravity, what you can do is to maybe transform the data, basically the data, so you can adapt to a specific format depending on the subscriber or the consumer, if that's your question. Yeah? I'm sure you don't want to. But you can do it.